Right, welcome back to the Conviction Fiction, the podcast where we just don't talk about reentry, we live it, we challenge it, and we go through it. I am your host, Antoine Rivers, and today's episode is one that hits close for so many of us, and that topic is anger, right? One of those words we don't like to talk about much. Not just the outburst, but the kind that simmers beneath the surface, that, slow boil, shaped by years of inside pain and betrayal and all of those feelings that ultimately lead us to survival mode. In this episode, we're unpacking anger through five powerful segments. So if you find value here, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe because your voice matters and your healing is worth it. Let's get into it. All right, let's just start with a hard truth many people avoid. Anger is not the enemy, but unexamined anger can become one, especially for those of us who've done time. Most of the time, anger often shows up before the cell door even closes. It's not just about what happened behind bars, it's more about what happened before the bars, what we carried into the prison system, and what the world gave us to hold. Now, for the formerly incarcerated, anger is often rooted in a lifetime of trauma, loss, abandonment, and sometimes betrayal. Many of us grew up in environments where showing vulnerability was dangerous, where grief, fear, or sadness, we couldn't do that. That just wasn't allowed to exist. So we morphed into something else, rage-filled people. That rage became survival. It became identity. And moreover, with time, it turned into a lens through which we saw the world. We saw the world through rage. So let's break down this with some real context because that's very important on this show. We want to give you the stats to go along with the facts, right? So according to the Bureau of Justice statistics, more than 70% of incarcerated individuals have experienced some type of trauma before entering the system. And that includes like physical abuse or community violence or neglect. When you add systemic injustices like over policing, poverty, and generational incarceration, it's no surprise that anger becomes a language of the oppressed. This is the language we choose to use, a language that we were forced to learn. So, with that being said, here's the problem. Once we are out, society expects us to, I guess, flip a switch or something. We are now supposed to be calm, composed, professional individuals without really ever having given us the tools, or we were not prepared with the tools to process what we've actually been through. And that's just unrealistic. Let's just be plain. It's unrealistic and it's inhumane. In No Turning Back, the new book that is out, I did share a story about my first week home. I can remember I was standing in line at the DMV trying to get my license, and someone cut in front of me. No, let me back that up. This is a more relevant story. I took my kids to Six Flags stuff. Okay, it was hot. You ever been to Six Flags over Georgia? It's hot, especially during these months. And we were waiting in line to get on the ride. I got my boys with me. And we're almost to where we're supposed to get on this ride. And just two little boys just came out of nowhere. They kind of ducked up under the rails. Now the line is probably, I want to say, deep. It's deep. It was more people, but we waited in that line for at least 40 minutes. Okay. And when we do 30 minutes, that's probably 40 was an exaggeration. 30 might be an exaggeration. Again, it was hot. But the point is, we waited our turn. And some guys just jumped in front of me, some little younger guys. And It was small, almost silly, but in that moment, I felt heat rising. I wanted to know where their parents was. I was wondering if we could go back to old school, like if you catch someone's child doing wrong, then you just whoop them, right? It wasn't about them jumping in front of me. It was about every time I felt like I was disrespected, dismissed, or dehumanized. That's the problem. That's what unhealed anger does. It confuses the past with the present. So I kind of like let it go, but I did wonder, like, where did they get their home training from? So if you ever felt like that, like your anger is bigger than the situation, you're not alone. The first step isn't to silence your anger; it's to understand where it exactly comes from. Okay, that's the first step. Understanding where your anger comes from. And as we move into this next segment, we're going to take a closer look at what happens when we don't address that root. If we don't understand where the anger comes from, we're going to understand how this can sabotage the very life we're trying to rebuild. So keep listening. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so we can keep pushing this new narrative forward together. Now, when we talk about reentry, people love to ask, why can't they just move on? But they rarely ask what someone's carrying. Anger, if left unaddressed, becomes one of the heaviest bags that we drag into our new lives. And the truth is, it doesn't just weigh us down, it can actively block our ability to succeed. It can actively, I'm going to say that again. If we don't address anger and effectively deal with it, it can actively block our ability to succeed. Now, anger doesn't always look like yelling or fist flying. Sometimes it's just a solid wall. Sometimes it's an attitude that says, I don't trust you, or I've been hurt too many times to be vulnerable now. And when you're trying to rebuild relationships or start new relationships or form relationships, hold down a job or even raise your kids, that wall becomes a prison of its own. Let's be very clear here. Anger is a natural emotion, but unmanaged anger is destructive. And it shows up in interviews when we feel judged. It shows up in halfway houses when someone checks our tone. It can show up with family when expectations collide with reality. The damage isn't always loud, but it's very real. And fractured connections, missed opportunities, violated parole terms, all of this can stem from unchecked anger. Now, according to the Urban Institute, formerly incarcerated individuals who report difficulty managing anger are significantly more likely to return to prison within 3 years. Let's not dismiss the link between unresolved anger and recidivism. It's very strong, not because these individuals are violent, but because the systems around them don't teach emotional tools, just behavioral compliance. And that's what kind of sometimes get me with some of the prison shows and some of the podcasts I listen to dealing with the prison experience. They don't address the underlying causes of prison. They don't understand, or they fail to address the emotional work that you have to do from within in order to prevent going back to prison, in order to change the narrative. These are all things that you have to address. I can remember speaking with Marcus, who served nearly 2 decades. He got out, enrolled in a job program, and started strong. I mean, he was doing well. But one argument with the supervisor, just one heated moment, and he was removed from the program. They never asked what he was feeling. They just said he was a risk. And that's the problem. We treat anger like a flaw instead of a wound. Okay. And that's not what it is. It's something that needs to be healed. So, up next, we're going to break down real strategies for managing anger, because the goal isn't to erase it, because it's not going to go away. Some of the greatest movements in history were fueled by anger. So, our goal isn't to try to erase anger, it is to try to understand it and redirect it before it controls the outcome. So just stay with me. Now that we understand where anger comes from, that unresolved feeling disrespected or betrayal, we know where it comes from and we know how it can block our path moving forward. So let's talk about solutions. Because here's the thing, anger isn't something you just get over. You have to work through it. You have to learn to manage it, not suppress it. And that takes real tools, not just willpower or someone saying it. One of the first steps is self awareness. Now, when you are able to recognize your triggers before you explode, that is very important. That means asking yourself, what am I really feeling right now? Is this about the present situation or something deeper? Right? When I was telling you the story about the kids that jumped in front of me at Six Flags, it wasn't about the kids jumping in front of me at Six Flags. It was about the feelings that I get when I feel that I'm disrespected, right? It's my feelings when I feel like I'm being overlooked, okay? So is this about the present situation or something deeper? I get mad or angry when I feel overlooked. I get angry when I feel disrespected. Now, it may sound simple, but this kind of reflection can be life changing. Just that small pause to understand can be the difference between progress and another setback. Now, next comes the cognitive reframing. This means you have to change how you view a situation. For example, instead of thinking, man, those little boys just disrespected me on purpose, they see me standing here, I reframed it and said, maybe they don't know. Maybe they have a flash pass where they can go to the front. Maybe it's something I don't know about. And their actions aren't really about me. Right? That mindset, that mindset shift, that mindset shift doesn't excuse bad behavior, but it protects my peace. Mindfulness and breathing exercises can also help. You don't have to sit cross-legged or meditate for an hour. Just start with small 4 deep breaths in and 4 out. It grounds you in the present. And when you've been trained to react to survive, grounding is essential for learning to respond instead of reacting. Community support is another powerful tool, whether it's a mentor, support group, or a therapist. Having someone to talk to when things build up can keep you from snapping. There's strength in reaching out. We weren't meant to do this alone. Now, going back to my book, I'm going to talk about that a lot because I'm very proud of it. In No Turning Back, I share a moment where I walked away from an argument, not because I was weak, but because I finally had found the tools to protect my future. That was growth and that was healing in action. Okay. And that's what we want to do. We want to put that healing into direct action. Um, Now, the good news is we can learn new responses, and that's where cognitive reframing comes into play. We can retrain our actions. We can learn how to dig into this resilience and how that plays a role in how we are turning our anger into purpose. So keep going. Like I said, if you are moved by this conversation, if moved by the podcast, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe because we're just getting to the good part. Managing anger, guys, is just one thing, but building the kind of resilience that keeps you grounded when life comes swinging, that's where the real change happens because life is always going to swing at you. It's always going to be a curveball being thrown. Resilience is what helps you not just survive, but thrive after incarceration. It's what keeps you from falling back into the same cycles when everything around you feels familiar, frustrating, or unfair. Now, resilience doesn't mean you don't get angry. It means you know what to do with that anger. Now, you've learned how to pause. We talked about breathing techniques, 4 breaths, deep breaths in, 4 out. We've learned how to process, how to reframe using cognitive reframing to change our mindset. We also talked about how to push through without self-sabotaging. And more importantly, you've learned that not every challenge requires a fight. All right, take for instance, I'm gonna give you another person that we have come across on the podcast through my life. It was a guy named Kareem. This brother had served 18 years and he used to be really quick to react. He told me that the first time someone disrespected him at work, he clenched his fist out of habit. But then he remembered the job, this job, is part of my freedom. My peace is more important than my pride. That one decision to walk away instead of exploding opened the door to a promotion months later. That's what resilience looks like. And resilience doesn't happen by accident, it's built up over time, it's intentional. You have to be intentional in developing coping skills. Things like journaling, physical exercise, creative expression, or even prayer. These things aren't just hobbies, they're lifelines. They're how we release pressure without imploding. Support also plays a huge role here too, because programs like trauma informed care groups, mentorship circles, and reentry coaching can help build emotional muscle. Organizations like Beyond the Chains and Common Good Atlanta are doing real work helping folks process the emotional load of reentry. And I love shouting those people out as they are doing the what they say, the boots on the ground work. So in No Turning Back again, go check it out because I talk about how I had to unlearn the idea that hardness equals strength. Because real strength is found in vulnerability. Okay, that's where the real strength is found. It's in the ability to feel something and still make the right choice. Now, we're not doomed to repeat the cycle. We just need the right tools and the right people walking with us. And in this final segment, we're going to now talk about, or I'm going to talk about how hope and how anger, when healed, can become a driving force for your transformation. So keep listening because your growth matters. Anger is real, it's powerful, but it's not the end of the story. What I want to leave you with today is this: anger doesn't have to define you, it doesn't have to dictate your future. You are not the sum of your worst emotions or your hardest days. You are more. And with healing, you can do more. Reintegration has never been about just getting a job, finding housing, or staying out of trouble. It's about becoming whole, whether you're doing it for the first time or you're trying to become whole again. And what that means is that you have to face the emotional wreckage that incarceration and life before incarceration often leaves behind. And that means transforming the pain, the rage, the bitterness. We got to transform all that into purpose, peace, and clarity. Things that a lot of people don't want to talk about. And that's why I like to fashion this podcast, which you're listening to, is actually reentry on the web. Okay. We are in a reentry environment. So I've seen people take their anger and turn it into advocacy. I've seen people who were once known for violence become mentors, coaches, authors, and fathers. I've seen women who carried trauma from decades stand in front of rooms and teach others how to heal. These aren't fairy tales, guys. These are real people. These are people like you. You can choose to do the work. You can choose not to let your anger win. There's one thing all of us have in common. All of us will have someone who believes in our ability to change, even when we don't believe in it ourselves. Sometimes you have to be that one for somebody, for yourself, right? You might have to be that person. It's not easy. Healing never is, but it's worth it. When I wrote the books that I've done over the years, I didn't write them from a place of perfection. I wrote them from a place of honesty. I wrote those books when there were days I wanted to give up, days I thought that my anger was who I was. But step by step, with therapy, community, and deep inner work, that's why it's called Life After Incarceration. I'll make sure that the journey home and the work from within was part of the title, because I realized that that's that inner work. right? I realized that anger was a response to being wounded. It's always been a response to being wounded. Now, with that being said, guys, um, I know that I deserve more. I knew that I deserved more than just survival, and you deserve more than just survival. Let me say this plainly: your story isn't over, right? You're listening, even if you're new to this podcast, even if you're struggling right now and don't know how to deal. If you even blew up on somebody on yesterday, if you're still trying to figure it out, what triggers you and all those things, right? There is room for you to grow, room for you to heal, and room to build something that lasts. So if you're on the outside looking in, or maybe you've never been incarcerated, but you love someone who has, give them grace. Understand that anger often comes from years of hurt, neglect, and survival. So be patient with yourself, be patient with your loved one, be present, but don't enable, but do encourage. It makes all the difference. Thank you guys. Thank you so much again for taking this journey with me today. Anger is complicated, but so is healing. So you're not alone in either one of these tasks. If this episode spoke to you, if it gave you something to think about or helped you see yourself or a loved one in a new light, do me a favor, like, comment, and subscribe. That's how we keep this conversation alive. That's how we build a community around truth, transformation, and second chances. That is how we change the narrative. And if you haven't already, go check out my book, No Turning Back: The Journey Home and the Work Within. It's filled with stories, reflections, and interviews, including tools for navigating the real emotional work of reentry, including what we talked about today. Because healing isn't a straight line, but it is possible. Until next time, I'm Antoine Rivers, reminding you that what's behind you doesn't get to decide what's ahead of you. Keep going, keep growing, and whatever you do, don't turn back.